On this week's Eastern Conference edition of the Locked On NHL podcast, the dust has settled with many big moves behind us. So who is the most improved roster in the Eastern Conference? We'll get into that conversation and some news and notes on this week's Locked On NHL, your team every day.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for tuning in to another edition of the Locked On NHL podcast. It's your team every day, local experts on the biggest stories 5 days a week. Every Wednesday, we've got you covered here on all things going on in the Eastern Conference. I'm Ross Levitan. You can find me daily at Locked On Ottawa Senators. With me, as always, it's the Battle of Ontario from Locked On Maple Leafs. It's Mike DiStefano. Mikey, how is your first true week of the offseason going?
Well, yeah, it's slow as per usual. Not much going on here, especially in Leafland. I guess there's just not a whole lot. People are starting to take a step back and go on vacation, I suppose. There is one random story of I don't know if you saw what's going on with Yanni Hakanpää. He signed a free agent deal with the Maple Leafs, but it hasn't been announced yet, and everyone's kind of wondering what's up because Steve Simmons put out a report that apparently people in Dallas thought that his career was basically over. He's got a knee injury that he might not be able to recover from, and thought that his hockey playing days were behind him. And then all of a sudden he signs a 2-year deal with the Maple Leafs, and it has yet to be reported, despite being talked about on July 1st by the general manager, Brad Treliving. So pretty much just the mystery behind that situation is really all we got in Leafs Nation right now. That and Marner talk. Marner talk will probably persist all summer.
It's never going to go away. Do you think that because the busiest part of the offseason, where we saw over $1 billion handed out on July 1st this year, do you think now that a lot of the dust has settled on those big roster reconstructions, that it's more or less likely that Marner gets moved? Now, I know the ball's in his court as well with the full no move clause, but do you think it's something where because people's cap situations were so uncertain and now there's more certainty to it, that you could become a little more creative in bringing that salary in?
No, I don't think so. I always was of the belief that the Maple Leafs, if they were going to make a deal, it was going to happen at free agency at the very least. Now that, free agency has come and gone, the first wave at least, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. You're not going to be able to replace his cap dollars with anything that's going to make your team better, I don't believe, at this point. So I think here on out, I believe the Maple Leafs will probably hang on to him next year. Who knows? There could be an extension before the season starts. That's always a possibility too, right? I think it was last August when we heard of a Austin Matthews extension, so maybe we'll see the same thing. Give us some nice news to talk about in August on Locked On Leafs.
Who do you think is still out there on the trade market? We always see a couple bigger moves late July, early August. I think the Matthew Tkachuk one came on a random Saturday evening, if I'm not mistaken, in the middle of late July a couple of years ago. Do you think there's any names that have been rumored? Rucker McGroarty in my neck of the woods is still on everybody's front burner, even though Murat Atesh from The Athletic said, look, multiple teams thought a deal was done at the draft, but they've become apprehensive to the route that the McGroarty camp is taking, where they feel there should be a very clear path to him jumping out of Michigan and stepping right into an NHL lineup. So now that that's the case, all sides are like, well, what are we going to do to move forward? I think that that's a super interesting one for a player that has no NHL experience. But do you think there are any guys who are already established in the league, high salary guys that could still be on the move?
Well, the one that's the obvious one, I think, is Jacob Trouba. Now, there was reports there for a bit at the draft that a deal was in place for him to go to Detroit, and then all of a sudden it didn't come to fruition. It sounds like he wants to stay in New York. I know that his wife, is doing a residency in New York. It was a big reason why he went from Winnipeg to New York in the first place. So it shouldn't surprise people that he wants to stay there. So there's obviously that. So whether or not they eventually, find a way to come to an agreement on a trade, whether it's, within the tri-state area, potentially, like maybe New Jersey, if they really wanted to make a deal, or Philadelphia, maybe, I'm not exactly sure, but that's one name that still is kind of out there as a possibility. I know the Rangers would prefer to move on from him, but he's got a no move clause. He's got a no trade clause. He holds all the cards realistically. So if you don't want to go anywhere, he don't have to. But that is one, veteran name, like a top name that I think a lot of us will be keeping an eye on. I do wonder, like out west a little bit, like Yaroslav Askarov, like a guy like that. There was some smoke there that teams were calling at the deadline or at the draft after they had signed UC Saros, if they wanted to maybe try and move off of Askarov. But I don't know if that has come and gone. You would think that would have came down at the draft or maybe ahead of free agency. At this point, maybe they just hang on to him and go with a tandem. I was also thinking about it. I was locked on the Eastern Conference edition, but Saros only extended 3 years? So
No, I thought he was a longer extension than that. Too bad we don't have Cap Friendly to help us out, but we got our friends over at Puckpedia that are doing as good of a job they can. No, that was an 8-year deal, man.
never mind. See, it's
That's
funny.
774.
I don't know why I was thinking it was a shorter term deal. Maybe I was looking at somebody else. But anyways, so like that's the one other player maybe who could have some interest. I know Nick Robertson asked for a trade too here in Toronto, whether that kind of comes to fruition. People are looking at David Kampf. Could that contract end up getting moved? I mean, I'm sure there will be a trade at some point throughout the summer. Like we always see at least one, decent level deal. So I think we probably will get at least one by the time training camp rolls around. Just can't really pinpoint exactly who it's going to be. If I did, I'd be making wagers and be making a lot of money.
The two signings that happened in the last week, I think we may have recorded right after Vladimir Tarasenko went to the Detroit Red Wings on a 2-year deal, just under $5 million. And then the Carolina Hurricanes brought in Jack Roslovic on a 1-year, $2.8 million contract.
Well, there was also the Nate Schmidt contract he signed in Florida for $800K.
A lot of Winnipeg connections here early on in the show, but he said it. He's already made his money and will be paid from Winnipeg this year and next year on the buyout. That's a great move for a guy he's familiar with from his time in Manitoba with Paul Maurice and the head coach down there. Like, he's a perfect replacement for Oliver Ekman-Larsson. He's not going to replace Brandon Montour. They're going to need to find someone else to put up points. But in a third pair role, a guy who can elevate and skate really well, even in his advanced age, he just got to a point in Winnipeg where it's like you're playing, especially in Canada, not only how well you're playing on the ice, but how well are you playing versus what you're making against the cap, because otherwise we could spend that and help somewhere else. So his former cap hit of just under 6 per, a lot different than under 1 per. So I'm happy for Nate Schmidt. He's one of the guys, if you ever get a chance to speak with him, he's one of the most engaging, uplifting, veteran-type personalities, and he's going to help that locker room. And not only, obviously, they have great culture. They're the Cup champs, but he's just going to be another piece in the puzzle, and I think that that's a great move for the Cats.
I think it's one of probably the biggest value signing, I would say, the offseason. Like, Schmidt's not $1 million player. 800,000 at that. Like, he's not. He's a far better player than that. I mean,
no, he was a healthy scratch at times last year.
I still think that, he probably could have got at least 2.5-3 million on the open market if he really wanted to, but seemed like he really wanted just, 1 year. Let me go see what we could do with old Paul Maurice, see if they could run it back and go back to back potentially. We'll see how that works out. But I thought that was a great signing, and definitely, to me, the biggest value deal at the very least here in free agency so far.
Yeah, he's making $2.7 million in each of the next 2 seasons for not playing in Winnipeg. So it's a little easier to make a decision based on that, much like Ekman-Larsson did, where he had the buyout that was already split between Phoenix and Vancouver, so he was able to sign for cheap. We saw that with Matt Duchene and Ryan Suter.
Utah.
Oh, well, no, at the time, Ekman-Larsson's contract was paid.
But it's now Utah.
Yeah. Man, Utah is going to be an interesting team, man. I like the makeover they did on their blue line. Go check out Locked On Utah HC for more on that. Let's look at it from Tampa's perspective. We'll get into the biggest overall improvements, but I kind of like what Tampa did there where they got younger. Now, say what you, or I guess you're evaluation of Connor Geekie as a prospect will play a huge part in how you evaluate this trade. But I think JJ Moser can step into a top 4 and be a solid player, whether he's playing with Chernak or McDonough or Hedman.
Yeah. I thought, are we going to get to it on the other side, or are we going to roll?
You want to get to it? That's a little tease. Okay, I want your analysis on that trade, and then we'll get into the biggest overall improvements and the biggest moves that you may have missed. I was talking to a friend who's an Oilers fan, and he's like, wait, the Sens got Linus Ullmark? What? It happened 5 minutes before Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Final. Of course he wouldn't realize that, but with so many moves made, it does take a deep breath and an evaluation period. So we'll get to that next. You're listening to Locked On NHL, your team every day.
Today's show brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the price you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers.
Welcome back to Locked On NHL, your team every day. We're a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, and we are very honored to be your first listen on this Wednesday, July 10th. For more on the biggest stories, go check out every individual Locked On NHL show. Just type in the team name, and you'll have instant 30-minute analysis, the latest that's happening all across the National Hockey League. I know our guy, Adam Denker, over at Locked On Tampa Bay Lightning's been diving into this trade for the last week. It's nothing new, but for me, it just signals that new direction of the Tampa Bay Lightning. Moving on from Steven Stamkos is enormous in and of itself, but to add Mikhail Sergachev, who was part of both of those long playoff runs that ended in Stanley Cup glory, that's a pretty big change to what we've seen the construction of this lineup.
Yeah, and I don't necessarily know if they got that much better, though. Like, I mean, Steven Stamkos was their captain, you know, kind of a heart and soul type of guy, the greatest shift of Stanley Cup history. We know all about that. And, like, Sergachev's a good player. And I wonder, like, bringing him back, you get Jake Gensel. Is Gensel an upgrade on Stamkos? Like, I don't think he is, you know. And then Ryan McDonough, he's now what, 33, 34 years old. Like, can he still be the defenseman that he was for Tampa in his first time around, where he helped them led them to a Stanley Cup? I don't know if he can be that guy. So it is interesting that the decision that they made to kind of revamp a little bit and move off of some players who were part of their core, that they identified as part of their core and had paid them accordingly over the last few years, and decided, okay, we're actually going to go and we're going to get more of we'll turn the clock back, I suppose, and get a McDonough, and then we're going to try and get a little younger and up in the forward position and bring in a Jake Gensel. But I'm not sold that it actually made them that much better.
What do you think about the signing that's very similar to what we were saying, other guys who were bought out one place, they picked their destination, getting Cam Atkinson on a league minimum-ish deal? I think he could provide some serious value down there, much like Nate Schmidt's doing on the other side of Florida.
Yeah, I mean, Cam Atkinson's a pretty solid pickup. What did he get up to last year? I can't recall how many points he scored last year.
I've got it right here. Shout out to our friends over at Puckpedia. I think I should probably get my stat up before I get to that. It's gonna take a little time to get used to the new setup.
Yeah. He had 13 goals, 15 assists, 28 points in 70 games for the Philadelphia Flyers. So, Atkinson's not necessarily the player that he used to be. Obviously, he's 35 years old now. He's going to be 36 next year. So he's not the guy he once was, where he was like a perennial 25 goal scorer. But I think he could still add a little bit of secondary, tertiary offense for this team and be, that veteran void, I guess, that maybe you're losing in a Steven Stamkos, someone who's been there. He's Cam Atkinson. Has he been to a cup final? Was he with Philly when they went to a final? No, he's
No,
probably
I
been
think
with Columbus.
that's a little early. No, he started that year. No, he started 1 year out. No, they went to the cup final in 2013, right?
Yeah, I don't know. 2009 actually. 2013, I think they
2009.
went.
No, because they lost to Chicago 2010. 2010, they
Yeah,
lost to Chicago. Chicago's first cup. Chris Pronger is still on the team
yeah,
in Philly. So no, he made his NHL debut the following year with Columbus. He played with Columbus all the way up till 2021-22.
yeah.
So his probably top highlight is beating Tampa Bay in 4 games, and now he's a member of the Bolts when they beat that historically good regular season game. But the Bolts are going to have to rely, win or lose, on their starting goaltender, Andrei Vasilevskiy. They need him to be his normal self, not the one that had a below 900 save percentage at home last year. That's just very unlike him. And I know he
Yeah.
had that late start with the surgery. His March was exceptional, and it kind of gave you a glimpse of what he can be. But man, he had 4 out of his first 5 months were below 900 save percentage. And I don't think I would be betting on him to do that again.
No, and that's the thing. I mean, when you miss so much time, it takes you a while to get back into the groove and back into things. And now I have an entire off season where he's not going to be recovering. He's going to be able to train and get himself, prepared for next year. So I do expect a nice little bounce back for Andrei Vasilevskiy. And look, that's ultimately the biggest difference between this team being successful and unsuccessful. Is Vasilevskiy going to be the boogeyman? Can he do what he's done in years past? If he can, then the Lightning are going to be totally fine. But if he can't, and they start conceding goals left, right, and center like we saw at times this year, that's where you're going to have some concerns with what's going on with this group. But bringing in Ryan McDonough is supposed to help kind of insulate the goaltender and bringing in JJ Moser. They're hoping can be a nice young piece that could come in and play some decent minutes for them. So in their eyes, they've improved the blue line. We'll see if it comes to fruition or not.
Impromptu power rankings. Give me the first your top 3 goalies in the Atlantic Division. There's so many good ones to choose from. Obviously, Sergei Bobrovsky, the way he played in the playoffs. Andrei Vasilevskiy, Jeremy Swayman. I'm going to throw Linus Ullmark in. Heck, he won the Vezina 2 years ago. There's a lot of talent in the Atlantic Division.
Are you disrespecting Joseph Woll?
I was at the game. He got the high ankle sprain last year. He was playing insane that game in particular, but he's a great goalie. I think he bounces back, but I don't put him up in the big dogs category.
I'm joking. Yeah, I mean, well, here's the thing. Are we talking about from last year or legacy? Because
no, neither. Like going into this upcoming season, who would you most want to be in your net?
Probably still Vasilevskiy.
He's my number one too.
Until he's really fallen off, I think I'll take him all day long. Right?
It's him or Swayman. Those are the top 2.
I mean, Bobrovsky, and see what Bobrovsky just did in the playoffs. You don't want
He'd be 3 for me.
Okay, interesting. I think I'd
And
probably go
Ullmark 4.
Vasilevskiy, Bobrovsky, then Swayman, and then
you're not putting anyone else above Ullmark.
No, probably Ullmark at that point, and then
I mean, Korpisalo's in Boston.
No, definitely not Korpisalo. I mean, in front of that blue line, maybe.
That's going to be fascinating to see.
You know what's going to happen.
It's going
to bounce back. He's going to have a bounce back in front of that blue line.
It would never have happened where he was. And
no, it wouldn't have.
He just
100%.
plays erratically. He plays erratically, and I just don't feel confident watching a hockey game where he's the goalie.
Okay. You know who else played erratically and also played for the Sens?
Matt Murray.
Well, I was going to say Dom Hasek, but sure.
Dude, I actually had the worst thought of my life today. And I was excited for half a second because I was thinking of the 4 Nations tournament. And I was like, yes, Ullmark. Now as a Sens guy, we got someone to watch other than Brady, who's going to obviously be on USA, maybe Jake Sanderson.
Not there.
You don't think Brady Kachuk's going to make Team USA?
No. Ullmark.
For Team Sweden, you don't think he's going to make that team? Are you nuts? It's him and Jacob Markstrom.
Yeah. No, I was thinking he was from like Czech Republic or something for a second.
Oh, no, that he wouldn't be there. No.
Yeah.
He's going to be in it. But then someone reminded me, hey, do you remember 06 Olympics? Hasek gets hurt, sends best chance at the cup. They had Zdeno Chara on their team. They had an absolute wagon. And Hasek got hurt at the Olympics and never played again that year. And then he won the cup in Detroit the following season. Sick. Very cool.
I mean, isn't that the year Ray Emery took him to a cup final?
That was the next year that they did that. Sorry. So it was 2 years later that Hasek won the cup in Detroit. But he wanted to come back. The team was like, no, you kind of left us out to dry. He was practicing for 2 weeks, and everyone was like, can you play, please? He's like, nah, not yet. Anyways, that's my gripe for the day. But let's get to some serious, bigger improvement. I'm glad we covered Tampa. I feel like over the next month, we should kind of go a little bit more of a deep dive on a team a week type thing in the Eastern Conference, because we're in the summer now. I think it's time to kind of line up what our projections are for next season. But I think we do need to get into the biggest overall moves that were made. Do you have any final thoughts on the Tampa Bay Lightning or that impromptu goalie discussion?
Well, the only thing I was going to say is when you talked about injuries and you talked about, some thoughts that you didn't like going through your head. I mean, at least Matt Murray is not a Senator anymore, and he is a Maple Leaf, though. He did remain a Maple Leaf.
He's a good third guy to have. You just can't really know what you're going to get at this point in his career, but I mean, seems like a good guy, and he's got the experience. He's got 2 shiny Stanley Cup rings that he stood in the net. Say what you want about kind of sharing the load all season with Fleury, but when the chips were down in the biggest games, I mean, he was in net for both those games to clinch the 2 Stanley Cups. But anyone who watches hockey knows that goaltending is the make or break aspect of it. You can have a great team, and if goaltending's your Achilles heel, you will not make it to the promised land. Just look at the list of Stanley Cup winning goalies, and I'll show you a list of solid seasons that allowed their team to win. But who improved the most overall in the Eastern Conference? We will discuss that next here on Locked On NHL. It's your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Here at the Locked On Podcast Network, FanDuel is our go-to spot for sports wagering. We all love sports. We never want them to stop. I get it. Playoffs are over in the NHL and the NBA. The NFL season hasn't begun. Baseball's great. And how about the fact that this summer we get the Olympics? So FanDuel is the place to go to check out everything when it comes to your sports betting. FanDuel lets us keep the sports going as well with bonuses and boosts daily. This summer, FanDuel's hooking everybody up. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Head over to FanDuel.com/lockedon and start making the most out of your summer. It's FanDuel. It's an official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Welcome back, Locked On NHL, your team every day. We have local experts on the biggest stories. We have 32 shows here on the NHL channel and plenty more on the Locked On Podcast Network. You want to know what's happening with Team X? Just type in their name with Locked On wherever you get podcasts and on YouTube. For more from me, you can check out Locked On Ottawa Senators. Mike DiStefano is my co-host here from Locked On Toronto Maple Leafs. Look, we've already covered extensively what our 2 teams have done this summer. I give the Senators a B. I want to see it on the ice. I want to see what they look like. It's different. It's less sexy than the offseason acquisitions they've made in the past, but hey, hadn't been working before, so get something different. And as I bragged about in the last segment, they got a goalie, and that's all I could ask for is getting consistency from that position. Mikey, chime in on that and then reel in to who your most improved team was this offseason in the East.
Yeah, well, I think I can pick right up, where you left off there, because of course goaltending is super important, right? And the Ottawa Senators know that, the Toronto Maple Leafs know that, and a team that found that out last year that I think finally got themselves a franchise goaltender is the New Jersey Devils, and that's the team for me that I think had will experience the biggest glow up based on what happened in this offseason, right? They go out and they trade and they finally get themselves Jacob Markstrom, and didn't have to give up a whole lot either. It was a Kevin Ball and a first round pick for next year. Like it really was not a big trade that they had to make to get him.
And it was
I think they
top 10 protected as well, that first round pick.
Yeah, top 10 protected as well. So, they were able to do that. They bring in Brett Pesci, one of the, biggest free agent defensemen that was out in the market. And, they kind of shifted some deck chairs defensively. They traded out John Marino to allow them to bring in Pesci to open up some of the cap space. They brought in Brendan Dillon as
Huge
well.
pickup.
So, yeah, like I think they had some really solid work done to improve defensively.
And,
You got Dougie Hamilton there, Jonas Siegenthaler. You've got a couple of young guys in Luke Hughes and Simon Nemec who are definitely going to take the next step. We always knew that this team had a lot of offense. Offense wasn't necessarily this team's problem. It was keeping the puck out of the net. And everything that they've done this summer so far is being geared towards keeping the puck out of the net. They'll let the Jack Hugheses and the Nico Hischiers and, the Jesper Bratts go out there and do their thing offensively and put up points and score goals. But they had to find a way to keep it out of the net. And I think everything they did will certainly prove to work out for them next year. I really like what the Devils did.
and not only that, they were able to keep 10th overall this year. They get Anton Silyev, and he's going to be close to NHL ready whenever he's able to get out of his his KHL contract. He was already playing 20 minutes a night in the KHL. So they've got that. It's almost like Brendan Dillon's contract will then hand over the reins right to Silyev when he's ready. But you mentioned goaltending's bad, like Pesci and Dillon, perfect veteran stabilizers on the back end that you can play one with Luke Hughes, play one with Simon Nemec, and then, you still have Dougie Hamilton, who you just pray stays healthy, because when he's on his game and healthy, this guy's one of the best defensemen in the league at putting up points. He's just a 15, 20 goal scorer like that. So I think that getting him back and healthy, plus the addition's huge. The one move that didn't make a whole lot of sense was giving up on Alexander Holtz the way they did. They traded him with Akira Schmid to Vegas for Paul Cotter and a third-round pick. Kind of felt like they left some value on the boards there so quickly after drafting him 7th overall in 2020. Yeah. But then they go out and bring back Tomas Tatar, who had some great seasons there, as a kind of, hey, we're going to plug that hole in the lineup, a second, third line winger with a more veteran stabilizer. I think that overall, you can't look at what Tom Fitzgerald did with anything but a hat tip and say, hey, you saw what your needs were, you addressed them. If you get a healthy Jack Hughes all season next year, it should be all systems go, and they should be gunning for a Metropolitan Division title if all goes as planned, and if Markstrom gets back to a 915 or above form.
I'll make this proclamation right now. Today, July 10th, Wednesday, July 10th.
Okay.
The East has to go through the New Jersey Devils. I made the same proclamation a year ago. I'll make the same proclamation today. I think the Devils are the team to beat in the East with the summer that they've had. And I'll tell you this, I didn't hate the Paul Cotter acquisition as much as most. Of course, at first I looked at it and I'm like, Alexander Holtz, why are you giving up Holtz for Paul Cotter, a fourth line center? But Paul Cotter, I think you look at what he does and what he represents, and you look at, won a Stanley Cup with Vegas, played a decent role with them. And then you look at what, the Florida Panthers, how well built down the middle they were. And like Paul Cotter, he's a big boy. He can kind of play a little bit of that Ryan Lomberg type of role. I just think they didn't have that. And they had an abundance of Alexander Holtzes in their system. And he wasn't really panning out, I guess, 4 years. Is it a little early to pull the shoot on him as a prospect? Probably. I think same thing with Matt Savoy when they made the trade with Ryan McLeod. I think there's a lot of parallels and similarities to the two deals. But I think Paul Cotter, he just, again, going back to the theme of New Jersey, realizing what do we need exactly to make this team better. I think they felt they needed a good penalty killing fourth line centerman to kind of help solidify things. And they paid a high price to make it happen, but they did. And I think that the team is going to be better off for it.
They are going to be much better. My choice for most improved team would probably have been New Jersey, but hey, let's argue. That's what today's show is all about, or at least disagree. I'm going to have to go, and it's almost like, okay, did they improve the most? Yes, but do I love their acquisitions? Like, do I think
I know
that they
exactly what you're going with?
I don't think they're going to, I don't know if they're going to gel, but if they do, the Washington Capitals could be a playoff team. Now, in quantity of moves and names, they bring in a ton of guys. I think Logan Thompson has a lot to prove. Charlie Lindgren, a Washington reporter gave him a 5th MVP vote. So at least one person was sold on his season, and they did have a brutal goal differential, still made the playoffs. So of course, Charlie Lindgren had a great season, and now there's going to be a bit of competition there with Logan Thompson going into his final year of his contract and asking for a trade from Vegas. Now, on the back end, Jacob Chychrun needs a defensive-minded partner with him. That's why it didn't work in Ottawa. They tried to play him with Thomas Chabot. It was 2 square pegs in one where you needed a round hole. This, getting not only him, but then announcing moments later they signed Matt Roy to a big deal. Boom. That's a pair right there. You don't put that anywhere but together. I think that's going to be good. And then, I mean, does anybody have less to lose than Pierre-Luc Dubois? Like, people just laugh whenever his name's brought up. At one point, this was a guy who could get you 60 points and be a solid defensive responsible player. Like, if trying to help Alex Ovechkin get to the NHL all-time record in goals doesn't light a fire under you enough, then I think maybe we should look for a different sport. But I think that he's going to have a bounce back year. Chychrun was dash 30 last year. He's due for a bounce back year, even though he was good offensively last year. I think the Washington Capitals, look for a dark horse here for me too, is Tarek Periskak, their first-round pick, just signed a contract. He's going to get a 9-gamer, and I think he could impress because we know they want to go younger too. Hendrix Lapierre, I think, is going to be in the lineup full-time. Connor McMichael signed a new deal. He's going to be a part of their kind of future, and it's just now they've slowed down the handoff, Mikey. To me, it's like, okay, now we're kind of back to win now mode. We've got some 26 to 30-year-old guys coming in on big contracts. Hey, like, let's send the message to our fans that we're not going to send Ovi off into the sunset. We want to see him in the playoffs for more than 4 games again.
Yeah, absolutely. And Andrew Mangiapane, another kind of roll the dice where it's like, okay, hasn't gone great in the situation in Calgary last 2 years, but scored 35 goals a couple years ago, right? Hasn't replicated those numbers, just 17 goals the following year and 14 this past in 75 games. But he's a guy who, plays excellent two-way game. He's someone who is not afraid to go into the corner and get pucks and retrieve them so they can get the puck over to Alex Ovechkin. So another nice little pickup there as well was snagging Noel Mangiapane out of Calgary for just a second-round pick. I like that pickup as well.
Yeah, Washington's going to be interesting. The Metro, to me, is a lot like tighter, all in the middle. Like anybody could emerge as, 1, 2, 3, 4, because we've got the Carolinas and the New York Rangers that were in the playoffs the last few years. They've gone head-to-head at certain points. And I think, didn't they?
You think Washington can compete there?
I don't know. I mean, if you get bounced, it's a lot to ask. It's a lot to ask to get bounce backs from both Chychrun and Dubois. But if you do, you've added and Matt Roy's top 4 defensemen, you've added 2 top 4 defensemen, and with Mangiapane, like that's 2 top 6 forwards. Like that's a pretty good haul for an offseason where you didn't give up a whole lot. I know Oshie's health is in question and Backstrom's done, but like, I don't know.
Well,
are we going to get first half Ovi or second half Ovi too?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, those were 2 different players last year. 2 different players. But you'd also expect some regression from Charlie Lindgren, right, as well.
But Logan Thompson, you're expecting him to have the best year of his career going into a contract year, and he just demanded a trade off of one of the best places to be and one of the best organizations in terms of we want to win now. Like, to me, that's a huge risk for Logan Thompson.
I think it's a little rich to put them into division title status right now. I think wild card for sure. They'll be battling for a wild card position, but I certainly wouldn't be. I wouldn't be putting money on FanDuel for division.
No. But hey, I bet you the odds are very sweethearty to get you to sprinkle on that,
as they should be.
So where's the second line, or where's the 2 top tiers in the Metro? Like Philly and Pittsburgh, they've got to be in there. The Islanders, I like the moves. They've got some added speed this summer. They had to add some speed. You hate them all the time, and then they just make playoffs.
I was saying no, like the Philly and Islanders. Like, I don't think any of those teams really do it for me. Like, to me, the line, like, you've got a solid, you've got a top 3. You've got Carolina, you've got New York, and you've got New Jersey. That's where the line is for me. You've got those 3, and then everyone else can battle for a wild card spot.
I guess what I'm saying is nobody is like obviously rebuilding in the Metropolitan like there are in some other divisions.
Columbus.
Am I missing a team? Columbus, but even they should want to take a step forward. They signed Monahan to big money deals, and like eventually you got to hope Gaudreau can like be a top. His hits, by the way, I saw that the other day. Last year he had 4 hits. Isn't that unbelievable?
No, actually, it's very believable.
Brady Tkachuk had a game with 16 last year. Gaudreau had 4 in how many games? Johnny Gaudreau. 2 hits last year. He had 2 hits last year in 81 games.
Jeez Louise, that's embarrassing.
You have to try to do that, no?
Like, well, yeah, I mean, not that hard, obviously, but that's
In
the
the
problem.
COVID,
You're not trying that hard.
in the COVID season, like the year that got cut short just before in March, 70 games, 1 hit.
That's impressive. I'm actually impressed.
It's impressive.
I'm actually impressed at how easily that guy can avoid contact.
I'm going to go out on a limb and say that the Monahan signing is not going to work out in Columbus.
Yeah, I thought that was one of the worst ones of free agency. That one, and
how about Joel Edmondson getting almost $4 million per season for 3 years in LA?
Yeah,
it's got 35.
That's got a little good Branson-ish to it, I think.
Yeah, where it's like, oh, 4x4. You're like, oh, $1 million a year for 4 years. They're like, no.
No, it's each and every year. Yeah, no. There was Chandler Stevenson got paid a little bit much.
You got to get winners, and they needed a number 1 center because Beniers, you could tell, and that was unfair of them to be like, hey, you had a good rookie year. You're our number 1 center. We got nothing to insulate you. We got Yanni Gourde to insulate you. But now, if he can be a full-time centerman, it's obviously too much term, but they had to get someone. And would you rather pay a little bit more? Or what if they got their hands tied and all of a sudden you got Sean Monahan as your number 1 option? Right? They got a guy who was kind of cast more on the wing in Vegas, but I think wants to play center. He's 2-time Cup champ with 2 different teams.
Yeah, when given opportunity, I guess, like when Eichel was out with injury and he was, put up into a top 6 role, you did see him succeed. But a little,
with Stone.
In the words
him and Stone together were very good together.
They were great. Well, just 2 very reliable defensive players as well. But in the words of Lou Lamoriello, a little too long for a little too much.
A lot of people are saying that with our show.
Too much money, too much term. One of those 2.
Yeah, it's too much for too long.
Yeah,
which is, I can hear one person yelling at a steering wheel telling us to get off. Too much for too long. Next week, we'll let's go with the Stanley Cup champs. We'll stay in Florida. Next week, we'll talk about the Florida Panthers off season and whatever news and notes come our way. But for now, we hand it over to Power Rankings Thursday on Locked On NHL. Thank you for being with us, making us your first listen each and every day. We are a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where we do have local experts on the biggest stories. That's Mike DiStefano. For more from him, go check out Locked On Maple Leafs. I'm Ross Levitan at Locked On Ottawa Senators. We are a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.